So today I'm going to be talking about the notes on evolution. So, biological or organic evolution is a gradual change that occurs in a population of organisms over a long period of time. The Earth is approximately 4.5 billion years old. It has changed over time in a process called geologic evolution. So geologic evolution, change in the Earth. On Earth, there are millions of different species of animals, plants, fungi, etc. Each individual organism is slightly different due to variations within a species. These variations allow for different survival mechanisms. In selective breeding or artificial selection, people breed plants and animals based on desired characteristics. This is not the same thing as natural selection, obviously. So, fossils have been found of species that no longer exist today, which is evidence for the fact that things have evolved. So Darwin developed his theory while he was a naturalist, which is a person who studies nature, on the HMS Beagle. When the ship anchored, Darwin went ashore and he collected plants and animals that led to his ideas on evolution and natural selection. Darwin observed that the characteristics of many organisms were remarkably well suited to their environment. Darwin was fascinated by the shell shapes of tortoises, the beak shapes of finches, and giant fossils of armadillos. So other theories. The religious theory says that all organisms were created by a supreme being, aka God. All organisms were created this way, and they will always be the same way as they were created. So Lamarck developed the theory of use and disuse, which said that the more a structure is used, the larger and better it would become. He also developed the theory of transmission of characteristics, which said that any trait an organism developed in its lifetime could be passed down to its offspring. Westman disproved Lamarck's theory by cutting off tails of mice and then allowing them to reproduce. The mice that he cut off the tails of, their offspring had tails. So that kind of disproves it, because if it was like Lamarck said, then the mice wouldn't have tails, but they did. So yeah. So theory. In everyday language, a theory is a hunch or a guess about something. In science, a theory is a broad explanation that connects many scientifically tested hypotheses and observations. Some other theories in science include the cell theory, gravitational theory, and atomic theory. Theories are well-documented scientific concepts. So, yes, evolution is a theory, but so is gravity, and we're not like flying around right now, so yeah. Anyway, natural selection. So, variations are differences between individuals within a population due to mutations and sexual reproduction. Mutations and sexual reproduction are the main causes, so you gotta know that. In natural selection, the environment selects which traits are best suited to individuals within a population. Darwin believed in population growth, struggle for existence, survival of the fittest, reproduction, and specialization. In population growth, individuals tend to reproduce more organisms than can survive in the area. So you can't really support how many people there are living. And because of that, there is competition within individuals and species, and there's survival of the fittest, when individuals with adaptations to their environment will survive. So if you have the right adaptations, you're going to live and pass on your traits. Darwin referred to survival of the fittest as natural selection. Organisms are selected by nature instead of by humans. Individuals that have adaptations will survive to be the ones who pass on their traits. In speciation, variations will accumulate over generations, and this will cause enough differences to make a new species. Darwin called this descent with modification. Modern theory combines Darwin's ideas with current knowledge that DNA is the mechanism that causes evolution. So adaptions. Some structural adaptations include webbed feet, long necks, thorns, etc. Some physiological adaptions include venom, webs, pheromones, which are like smells that you send off in order to attract the opposite sex, and etc. So some behavioral modifications are migration, courtship displays, and fawn freezing, etc. Some benefits of adaptions are camouflage, warning coloration, and mimicry. Evidence. So one example of direct evidence for evolution is fossil comparisons, where you can compare fossils, and that shows that life on Earth has changed throughout time. Some types of fossils are fossilized bones, teeth, and shells in rock or tar, or you can have whole organisms preserved in amber or ice, and there's also imprints of leaves, footprints, or other things. So sedimentary rock is formed by layers of sediment under pressure over time. The layers at the bottom are older, and the earliest organisms were simple, and over time they got more complex. So you can see the simpler ones are farther below us, and then the more recent ones are closer to the ground, higher up. So anyway, aquatic plants and animals have adapted to terrestrial environments. Evidence shows that changes occurred over thousands or millions of years. Most species that have existed on Earth are now extinct. So one reason for this is mass extinctions, which are relatively short geologic time periods in which lots of organisms on Earth die off. Some causes of this can be a meteor crash, which is like why the dinosaurs people say died. They died. Ice ages can be another cause of mass extinctions, and in current events, like some of the human activities have caused a lot of extinctions. So one example of indirect evidence is comparative anatomy, which is comparing the structures of different species. Homologous structures are structures that are parts that are similar structurally but have different functions. Homologous structures indicate that related organisms have a common ancestry, and they kind of separated what their functions were due to the process of Divergent Evolution. So analogous structures are parts that are different structurally but have similar functions. An example of this would be the wings of birds compared to the wings of a fly. Analogous structures indicate that similar environmental pressures result in similar structures, and the process of this is Convergent Evolution. So vestigial structures are structures that exist in an organism but don't serve any function today. Embryology is the study of the stages an organism goes through as it develops, usually in the womb. So comparative embryology shows that related organisms show similar stages to one another. For example, a human embryo looks like a chick embryo in the early stages. This indicates that common ancestors exist. Comparative biology shows that some of the chemicals that make up our bodies are in all organisms, like DNA, proteins, carbs, etc. You can find those in everything that's living. The molecules related to, the more closely related your DNA is to one another, the more similar their biochemistry. All organisms share DNA that is very similar, like we're 50% banana. This indicates that common ancestry exists among all organisms. Comparative cytology shows that animal cell organelles are mostly the same as plant cell organelles. There's a lot of similarities. This indicates that all living things are related. Okay, so summary. Evolution doesn't have a set direction or goal. Organisms and species do not evolve to become better, per se. Some populations go through time with little or no change, usually when the environment remains stable. Some populations die out and go extinct. Some populations change or adapt to a particular environment. Sometimes this can start a more complex species if they evolve a lot. Evolution of populations. So a population is a number of individuals of the same species in the same geographic area. Genes, as we probably know, are sections of DNA that code for proteins. Most DNA is not made up of genes. This is non-coding DNA. Some sources of genetic variation are DNA mutations and gene shuffling, population curves, and speciation. Some mutations are harmless, and some are harmful or beneficial. So most of them have no impact at all, but those that do have an impact can be either harmful or beneficial. DNA gets shuffled during sexual reproduction. The parent's DNA is combined, resulting in variations of DNA and thus physical structures. Traits in a population are typically in a bell-shaped curve. Directional selection selects for one extreme, disruptive selection selects for both extremes, and stabilizing selection selects for the middle of the curve. So that's what most of it is, middle of the curve. So the more beneficial trait is, if you're going off of the bell curve, the most beneficial traits are in the middle of it. So you want to be like normal. Speciation is the formation of a new species. Speciation happens when a group of organisms that contain enough genetic variation and the population is reproductively isolated, meaning that they cannot reproduce and have fertile offspring. Isolating mechanisms can cause mutations to increase in a population. Geographic isolation is when two populations are separated by a geographic barrier that makes it so that they can no longer breed together. For example, a mountain, something like that. So natural selection works separately on each group and leads to a distinct species. So reproductive isolation results from the changes in breeding behaviors. The courtship or reproductive strategies become so different that they cannot interbreed. There are two different hypotheses for how speciation occurs. In gradualism, organisms evolve at a slow and continuous rate by building mutations slowly over time. In punctuated equilibrium, organisms evolve rapidly in short periods of time, followed by a very long period of time with no significant change. Then go back to your short period of a lot of change, and then long period with no change, etc. It's like a hill versus stairs, basically like that. So, history of life. So there have been many hypotheses on where the first life came from. So divine creation states that God made everything, but we can't really test that scientifically. The extraterrestrial hypothesis says that a comet or a meteor brought the necessary materials to start life. Some biomolecules have been found in objects from outer space. However, this is difficult and possibly impossible to test the entire hypothesis scientifically. The scientific hypothesis is that a abiogenesis occurred during the history of Earth. This means that non-living materials of the primitive Earth generated the first life form. So we came from something that wasn't living, which I still don't really get. There's a lot of gaps and uncertainties in this hypothesis. Okay, so other ideas that happen in history. So Aristotle believed in spontaneous generation. He thought that living things can come from non-living materials. Francisco Redi disproved spontaneous generation in what he called large organisms, which were basically non-microscopic. Von Leeuwenhoek discovered microscopic life in pond water. I'm not sure why they added that, but I guess we gotta know it. Louis Pasteur did an experiment which disproved microscopic spontaneous generation using long, curved neck flasks. Modern scientists study the history of life on Earth using laboratory simulations, fossils, radioactive dating, geologic patterns, and biochemical analysis, which is like DNA comparisons. Earth's history. So elements in living things include carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. Earth's early atmosphere probably contained water vapor, methane, carbon dioxide, ammonia, and hydrogen gas. There was no free oxygen. Since there was no oxygen, the first cells must have been anaerobic heterotrophs that consumed biomolecules. These cells took in nutrients from the ocean and generated more carbon dioxide by anaerobic respiration. Photosynthetic organisms then evolved using the carbon dioxide from the anaerobic heterotrophs and also by using sunlight. These organisms generated oxygen. This happened around 2.2 billion years ago. The presence of oxygen would have allowed anaerobic organisms to evolve. And this whole thing is called the heterotroph hypothesis. So there we have it. I hope this wasn't too confusing. And for the record, I'm not trying to offend anyone on this issue. I'm saying what's in the notes, which I personally think has a lot of evidence behind it. But I hope this helps you study, and bye!